Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. So most of you probably know that for the last couple of months, italki has been sponsoring the podcast. And italki is one of our favorite language learning platforms because it's so efficient and affordable, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home. So you can hop on Skype with somebody from a country like Colombia or Venezuela or Costa Rica, and you can talk with a local about Spanish from the comfort of your own home, and you can really choose what you learn and how you learn it and at the rate in which you learn it. And we've had a great promo going on with italki for the last couple months where when you sign up for your first lesson, you get your second lesson free, and that's been at www.theworldwanders.com/italki. And we wanted to hear from some of you who have signed up for your language lessons. What do you think of italki? How has your experience been? And so if you have signed up for the promotion and you've had your experience with italki, send us an email at info@theworldwanders.com and let us know what that experience has been like.
We both fell in love with travel because of the way it made us feel. Waking up every day excited for new experiences, excited to see new places, to try exotic foods, reminded us of what it felt like to truly feel alive. We were living a self-directed life for the first time while we were traveling, and it felt amazing. But when we came home from our first 6-month trip, we fell back into passive living. We found whatever jobs paid the most and spent 2 years doing what we thought we should be doing, working 9 to 5, going out on weekends. The spark inside of us, the feeling of being truly alive, slowly faded, and we were drawn back into the gray monotony of passive day-to-day living. We believed the feeling of being excited to be alive was something we could only get traveling, so we didn't take any action in our careers. We didn't apply the same assertive, self-directed living to our lives at home as we had while we were traveling. Our current sponsor is Praxis, and Praxis is all about helping young people find out what makes them feel alive. Going through the Praxis program was a crucial step for me in creating a life that was full of the things I loved about traveling. If you've experienced the same spark and excitement while traveling and are looking for a way to bring it back into your day-to-day life, go to discoverpraxis.com, hit the schedule a call button, and find out if the program is right for you.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanders podcast. We're excited for today's episode where we're going to be sharing our experiences from our time in Malaysia. But before we dive into today's topic on Malaysia, we'd like to give a couple of thank yous to our newest Patreon supporters.
So James, Chelsea, Corrine, and Brittany, thank you so much for your support. It goes a long way to making the show happen, and we very much appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Today on the podcast, we are talking about our experiences in Malaysia.
Shout out, Malaysia.
Yeah, Malaysia's amazing. We loved Malaysia, hey?
Yeah, wasn't on my radar at all the last time we went to Southeast Asia, but so far it's been one of my highlights.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context, if you haven't been following along with our Asian adventures, we are working and traveling at the moment. So our original plan was to spend our first month pretty stationary, but we'd booked the TBEX conference in Manila, which we talk about in our Manila episode a couple episodes back. And we found out that the Philippines has really, really bad Wi-Fi. So we're like, that's not a really good start to this whole digital nomad thing. So we changed our plans, started in Singapore, which we also did an episode on, spent a week in Manila, and then we were like, we're not going to Macau till November. We've got a couple of weeks. Where should we go? And we decided to go to Malaysia.
Yeah, so that decision was really based off looking at the map of Asia on Google Flights and seeing where is it cheap to fly, both from Manila and then to Macau, and where is a cool city we haven't been before. And Kuala Lumpur is a hub for Asia, so it's a cheap place to fly from wherever you are. Great city. Well, we hadn't been, but we'd heard a ton of good stuff about Kuala Lumpur, which is kind of weird to me. Well, last time we went, we were in Thailand, all the way down South Thailand, and never really thought about going.
I think I kind of remember people talking about, like, when we were in the Thai islands that, you know, they were going down to KL and Singapore, and then they'd fly onwards to other places, maybe like the Philippines or Indonesia or something. I was so set on going to Australia, though, that I feel like I just blocked any of that conversation or recommendations like out of my mind. Like, I was like, oh, that's great. I'm going to Australia.
So maxed out on our comfort zones. We were like, we just need to get to the developed country. But like little did we know that it was like sitting like 100 miles away.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
you get that dose in Kuala Lumpur that's really only really available to you in like some areas of Bangkok.
Yeah.
So we went from Manila to Kuala Lumpur. We had 10 days in KL where we really just focused on getting on top of all of our responsibilities, podcast-wise and other work-wise, and then did a bit of travel. We went up to the Cameron Highlands, over to Ipoh, back to KL, and then out.
Yeah. So on this episode, we're going to focus really on what our experiences were like in Malaysia. And that tends to be what we do on the podcast in general. It's hard to speak.
Sometimes we like to focus on someone else's experience.
Well, in interviews,
We're talking about Steve's experience
It's always Steve.
in South Africa.
Yeah. And so if you're tuning in for the first time or you're planning a trip to Malaysia and you're not really sure what we're all about, we are not Lonely Planet. We are not Wiki Travel. We are not covering everything in Malaysia. We're simply talking about our experiences, sharing our stories. And we went to a limited number of places in Malaysia. So if you're looking for advice about the entire country, this might not be a resource. But hopefully everyone who's listening is ready for some fun stories about KL and the places that we did go. Yeah, so like Ryan said, we flew into KL, and the Kuala Lumpur airport is like an hour outside of the city. It's like 60 miles or something outside of the city, which is something that I found really interesting because it seems like a lot of big cities tend to have their airports pretty close because they're these massive cities. Is that not a fair statement?
I don't think that's fair. But it is particularly far away from the city.
Yeah.
Most cities have them out in the outskirts just so they allow room to develop. But yeah we had booked, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say we'd booked a really sweet Airbnb.
Yeah, so we had been excited in advance. I think when we were in Singapore, we found a place to stay in KL and very affordable place for accommodation. So we were looking on Airbnb, found this apartment that had an infinity pool. So the photos were like of an infinity pool where you're looking at the Petronas Towers, which if you followed us on Instagram while we were there, we had a whole bunch of photos of these big twin shiny towers. So we found this beautiful studio apartment in a nice new complex. It had a gym, it had a library, it had 2 pools. So we were super jacked up from like a month in advance about getting to KL and trying to temper our expectations. I remember as we were walking into the apartment building, I'm picturing it smelling bad, smelling like smoke, and picture there being bugs just to try to temper it. But it fully lived up to our expectations. So just to give some context, it was really nice studio apartment, all those cool amenities, and I think we were paying like 37 Canadian dollars a night to stay there.
Yeah, so super affordable, especially between 2 of us. We had a small kitchen, a washing machine, a couple of desks, a couch, a bed, and a bathroom.
Super fast Wi-Fi.
Yeah, great Wi-Fi. I FaceTimed with my parents at one point. My mom's like, your Wi-Fi is breaking up. And I was like, it is not my Wi-Fi. That is your
like
crappy.
4 times faster than your Canadian
this
bullshit
is your
Wi-Fi.
Don't just assume because I'm in Malaysia that this is my Wi-Fi. I've got really badass Wi-Fi here. And the reason why we booked 10 days in KL was because we do have to do some work. And after a couple weeks of, exploring Singapore and then having a full-on week in Manila where we spent a lot of the time at the conference, doing activities, meeting new people, and learning lots of stuff, we really needed to kind of catch up on life. It was interesting as we took like Airbnbs around, people would be like, 10 days in KL? Not Airbnbs, as we took Ubers around. Our Uber drivers all seemed to be like, wow, that's a long time in KL. And it kind of is if you're only there as a tourist because there's actually not that much touristy stuff to do.
Yeah, I mean, there is cool cityscape, so it's cool to go down to the Petronas Towers. There's a really nice park over there. And then just like the street food is really good in KL. And then I'm blanking on the name of the place.
The Batu Caves.
Batu Caves are there. And there's some cool hikes that are around and accessible and we'll talk about. But yeah, it's not like
arriving in London or Paris or Rome where you've got a list of maybe 30 things that you want to get done and you're like 3 days is not enough for this.
Yeah, the place I think it's like a really good place to like recharge and like get some of the comforts from home that you're maybe missing. Find like a nice place, hang out, cool bars, stuff like that.
For somebody who's listening, who's like comforts from home, like what comforts from home would I get in Malaysia? What comforts from home did you enjoy while we were in KL?
There was a really cool juice bar that we found where you could get like really cheap raw juices, which was nice because we'd been eating like a lot of like rice and meat. So it was cool to stock up on some veggies.
Who was eating meat?
I was eating meat. Yeah.
Lots of rice.
We went to a luxury movie, Doctor Strange, which if you've seen it, let us know what you think. It was a cool movie though. Made us want to go to Nepal.
Yeah.
Work on our superpowers.
I feel like I'm going to find that doctor or that lady and I'm going to enter the vortex.
Yeah. Stay tuned for our Nepal episode. Movie theaters, a ton of really good restaurants, really good cafes. Just like a place where if you'd been like, you know, in like southern Thailand on the islands and stuff, and you're used to kind of slumming it, it's nice to like show up in a city and, you know, maybe like go to some restaurants that are kind of Western and
even like a proper grocery store.
Yeah, to go to a grocery store.
A massive luxury if you've been traveling places where you're like, what is this weird foreign grocery store where they don't have everything from all over the world? It's one of those things when you travel, you really realize how, you know, our grocery stores over in Canada or the US, I mean, any developed country really, we really get things from all over the world. Like we get things imported and exported. And I found the same thing in Malaysia. Like we're in KL and I was like, oh my God, there's almond milk here. It's really expensive, but they've got it. And it's something that I haven't really been able to find since Malaysia.
Yeah.
So you kind of alluded to the things that we kind of did in KL. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the stuff that we did do?
Yeah. So day-to-day life in KL basically went like this. We would get up in the morning, find somewhere to do work, maybe work 4-ish hours, work kind of like knock off the morning and then go find something to do in the afternoon. So right off the top of our list, like one of the top things to do is to head down near the Petronas Towers and to find a place to watch sunset. So if you go get dropped off at the Petronas Towers, you can take some cool photos from right there and then walk across the park to Trader's Hotel. And there's a bar up at the top, and someone recommended to us on Facebook going to that bar and watching sunset from there. So we did that, get some really cool photos. It's tough because you have to make a reservation to get a seat like right by the window. So we had to like lurk over to the booths.
That's okay though. Like most people were doing that and nobody seemed really upset about it. But it's really great if you kind of go before sunset and you can take some photos of the Petronas Towers from the park side, like KLCC Park, and you can also take from the other side, and then you can walk through the park as the sun's setting and then get up to the rooftop where the Sky Bar is in Trader's Hotel in time to see the buildings start to light up. I think that that's really, really cool, is actually seeing the sunset, because the sky changes so many different colors and the buildings start to light up more as the sun sets. And then after the sun sets, you can go back down and walk back through the park and then get another amazing view of the towers completely at night.
Yeah.
And they're definitely the most spectacular at night.
Yeah. And then from the area where we were staying, it was kind of on the east. Yeah. To the east of there. So we could see the whole downtown, which was really cool at night because the tower there is also lit up. It has a lot of lights going on. You could just see the whole downtown. Really cool spot to be.
Yeah, and then one of the other things that we really enjoyed doing was going to the Batu Caves. And the Batu Caves are about 30 minutes from, I guess, sort of like downtown KL. They're super accessible, though. Uber is great if you're with, you know, one person or a couple people. If you're on your own, there's a bus or a train that'll go there super affordably. You don't have to make a reservation. You don't need to have a tour. You can just show up there. It's free to go and explore most of the caves. There's one cave that it does cost money to go to, and we opted out of doing that. It did look cool, though, if, you know, spiders and insects are your thing, which they're not ours. And the Batu Caves are famous because they have a big golden goddess who kind of guards this temple that's in a cave. And I'd never really experienced...
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a Buddha, so it'd be a goddess. It was a female, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I seem to think that all of these... I'm like, is Buddha male or female? Buddha's obviously male. No, it's a goddess, though, that's outside of the cave.
And it's a Hindu temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go up, you walk
There's
towards
272
There's
stairs.
Yeah, big ass golden sculpture of something. And then long staircase that leads up into the caves. You kind of walk down and up into the caves, and then there's a temple in there. And kind of like monkeys running rogue all over the staircases. A lot of people. And when we were there, unfortunately, the monument was under construction. So there was scaffolding set up all around it.
Yeah, it didn't make for the best photos, but I mean, that's just a part of the reality of being places at certain times, is that you don't always get the best photo of something, but we still got to see the caves and have that experience. And I think that there was a part of me that felt like a little bit disappointed when I got up to the caves, because the temple, like you walk through this cave, which is really cool, but then the temple is nothing like extraordinary. It's kind of just a temple in this really cool location.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely like worth checking out, but it's nothing that's like mind blowing. I think if we were both more skilled / interested in photography, I think it'd be a really cool place for photos, because there's all these monkeys around, so you can kind of take some cool photos of them. The caves, if you know what you're doing, you can get some cool shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the lighting and stuff, I think that would be really cool.
And then it is just like, it's one of those places where it's the most popular thing to do, where people go to KL and are like, oh, hey, you've got to go to the Batu Caves. So it does have that kind of tone to it.
Yeah, and then there's some vendors around it. There's some other areas that you can walk kind of nearby. There's a couple of other temples with also some really beautiful sculptures. I snapped a couple photos of those, and I felt like they were not quite as impressive as the big golden goddess, but still really, really cool to check out.
So what was the other kind of stuff that we did in KL?
So we tried to hike East Tabor Mountain, which is probably the most popular hike in KL. Once again, it's about half an hour outside of the city. It would actually be, if you didn't do a tour and you did it on your own, it would be awesome to kind of pair that with the Batu Caves, like maybe hike in the morning and then go to the Batu Caves after, because they're pretty close to each other, just north of the city. And so once again, we hopped in an Uber. We went out to this random area where our map said this hike was, and you can either hike the West Ridge or the East Ridge, and we'd heard that the East Ridge was better. And so we go and we're trying to find where the pathway is, and there's like this caution tape, like yellow tape with black writing on it, but it's all in Malay, so we can't read what it says, but it's like pretty clear that we're not supposed to go up there. And then a nice friendly man who lived nearby was like, oh, it's closed, you can't go up. And I guess somebody had died recently on this hike, because it's a little bit dangerous for people who aren't prepared for it.
Yeah, so that one in particular, it's a ridge, and apparently there's a lot of sections where you have to like drag yourself up on ropes. Pretty technical hike that's not that long, but it has some risks, and it seemed like a lot of people don't really take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the top from the bottom, so it's really not that big, and I think that that's why people are like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. There's also a lot of like bushes and shrubs that I think kind of hide how steep it is. Like, it's not just completely rocky cliffside. But if you fall, I mean, you fall quite a ways, and it can be quite deadly. A couple people have died. So at that point, it was closed, both the west and the east. We did try to go up both sides, and both times we were stopped and told that it was closed, unfortunately. But I think that I would recommend trying to do that if you could, because apparently it's one of the best hikes in KL. Instead, we hopped back in a car and we made our way to the Kanching waterfall, which is kind of a nature reserve area with, it's kind of like one big waterfall that goes down in sort of stages with pools. So it kind of makes up like kind of 8 or 9 waterfalls, but it seems to all be the same stream of water. And we walked right to the top. There was monkeys along the way, and I mean, basically, we just wanted to get outside for a day. We wanted to get some exercise. We wanted to get out of the city a little bit. And I think that fulfilled my need for nature and not as much city life.
Yeah, it's a cool park.
There's a couple, like, after we couldn't do East Tabor, I kind of pulled up, like, best nature reserves in KL. And there's stuff all around the city. So basically, KL is surrounded by, like, lush mountains every which way. And
the bird park in Kuala Lumpur is very popular as well.
Yeah, I really wanted to go to that. I don't know why we didn't.
It was kind of funny when we we were in KL for 10 days, and then we went up to the Cameron Highlands, to Ipoh, and took a bus back. And on our way back from the bus station to the hostel we were staying at, we took an Uber, and our Uber driver was super friendly, super eager to provide value. So he was like, oh, what do you guys like to do? Have you been here? Have you been here? What have you done? Where do you like to eat? What kind of food? Anyways, and he's like, you've been to the bird park? And we're like, no. And he's like, well, you need to go to the bird park.
He was kind of like, what have you been doing in KL for 10 days?
Yeah, 10 days. Whoa.
He's like, you've been here for 10 days and all you've done are the Batu Caves.
Yeah, he's like, should have been a tour guide.
Yeah.
But yeah, so bird park is definitely a big thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your thing. We just didn't get to it. What else did we do in KL? We ate a lot of good food. There was some really good Indian food. We drank a lot of good coffee. We found a lot of comforts from home. And then we also did 2 escape rooms.
Yes, 2 escape rooms.
Yes, we talked about in our Manila episode how we did our first escape room and we did not successfully escape. We almost made it. And we found this escape room in KL, so we decided to go. It was like the second easiest one for Breakout Escape Malaysia, I think. And we didn't quite get it, which is kind of discouraging between the two of us because we kind of hold ourselves to a high.
We made it like right to the last clue though.
Yeah, we just like
help,
hold ourselves to like a high intelligence standard. And we're like, damn. So we went back the next day.
Well, so yeah, they give a coupon once you go there the first time. That's like, if you come back on a weekday, you can do it cheaper.
Yeah, so we got a little bit of a discount, came back the next day and finally escaped. What did you feel in that moment? I was so jazzed up.
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't remember feeling excited?
It was nice, yeah, to finally get one.
I was like, oh my God, we made it out of this
What
thing.
did you feel in that moment? Makes it sound like it was like winning the Stanley Cup or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like our equivalent. It's like the escape room equivalent.
But so overall, KL is really nice city, tons of good food, lots of good coffee shops, lots of good things to do. But it's a place where there's no real like expectations. And so if you listen to our interview with Blake Bowles last week, he kind of talks about when he's planning these unschooled trips, he looks for places where there aren't really many expectations and you can kind of just go and explore and do what you want. And Kuala Lumpur is a really good city like that, where it's not many people are going to be like, oh, you went there and didn't do this. You went there and didn't do this. But it's a great place to be for a little while because you can go out and find things you want to do. If it's walking somewhere, doing a hike, checking out a movie, just eating really good, diverse food, if finding street food, Chinese food, Indian Malay food, everything's there, and a really good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. It's been really interesting to watch my progression as a traveler because I feel like it's the type of city that I would have been, I don't know, maybe a bit like discouraged with a couple of years ago because I really liked to do things and see tourist attractions. And I do still love that aspect about travel. But I also find that it's almost relieving to arrive in a city where you've got a bunch of time and there's not that much to do there because you get to catch up on sleep. Maybe you take that time to catch up with friends and family from home. You can get your inbox down to 0. You can just like enjoy and get to know a city really slowly, which is kind of a great thing about travel, especially if you travel long term and you're on the go constantly. So KL is a really pleasant place to be. It's pretty organized. It is a busy city, but traffic's not too bad. They've got Uber, so it's really convenient to travel. They've got an efficient train system that's also great. There's lots of great restaurants that you can check out. It is a Muslim country though, which is something that I found interesting. I didn't really know much about Malaysia before we went there. And as a woman, I tried to dress a little bit more conservatively just because the female population there is all Muslim. And so they keep themselves quite covered.
Yeah, definitely. You see, when you walk around, you see most women have some sort of head covering on where they cover their neck and their hair. And then you see people in like shorts and t-shirts and you're like, oh yeah, those are white people.
Those are foreigners.
So Kuala Lumpur was really our first time on this trip where we settled into a city and we're trying to get into a rhythm of balancing our responsibilities with exploring. How was it for you getting into that zone?
It was actually really fun. I felt like because we had 10 days in the city, there was no pressure to get all this stuff done in one day. And I really liked that we were able to get up and do the things that we needed to do in the morning, maybe go for a swim, come down, go get some lunch nearby, and then head out in the afternoon to do an activity, grab some dinner, come back, like have a relatively chill evening. I felt like it was really easy to balance the things that we needed to get done with the things that we wanted to see within the city. How did you feel?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I felt really fulfilled being able to check some things off of my long-term projects list, as well as going out and enjoying the city. It's something that's interesting about doing this trip, and a difference between traveling before, where when you've got stuff on your mind about things that you need to get done, or you don't really need to, but you feel responsible for getting done, it kind of takes your mind away from exploring and from enjoying your trip. So it's really nice to have a balance where you are getting your time in to be able to be fulfilled on that work side of things so that you can enjoy your trip. Because for us beforehand, we were running around a lot, and that was our first time to really like focus in and get some of those responsibilities done and kind of like clear your head so you can go out and just like be in the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something that I've always really liked about travel is that you have the time and the space to separate yourself from whatever was stressing you out back at home. So if it was a job or family or relationships, you have that space. And when you have responsibilities or work that you have to get done while you're traveling, it can kind of take away from that element of travel, that benefit of travel that you get.
I mean, it doesn't kind of, it like completely does.
Yeah. And in some ways it can make travel not as enjoyable. So there's been certain moments on this trip where I'm trying to be present with what we're doing. Yet in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, I really need to send this email, or oh, I need to do this podcast episode, or I really needed to write this blog post today. And I'm in this really cool moment, yet, this thing that's on the back of my mind is like taking me away from this moment. And that's something that I experience consistently while I'm at home. And it was really nice to be in KL and have the time to kind of get a hold of the inbox, get a hold of the to-do list, and feel in control of it. Because if you don't have the time or the space, it can be stressful to feel like you're doing these tourist activities, or you're doing these things that should be really enjoyable, yet you've got this like pressure to do something else that's kind of irking you.
Yeah, we both kind of felt like almost nostalgia for previous trips at points this time, because you think about that kind of sense of freedom that comes from just like having quit your job and sold your stuff, and now you're just traveling, and like it's literally like you have no responsibilities to anyone other than yourself, other than just like trying to enjoy yourself and try to learn and try to be happy. And so when you think about travel and work at the same time, you're like, oh, I'm going to be traveling, I'm going to make money. It's like best of both worlds. And it is awesome. It's great. But there is almost a sense of you lose some of the good stuff about travel, because you now don't have that mental freedom to just say, I'm going to wake up in the morning and focus on whatever I can do today that's going to make me the most happy. And I think it's definitely a skill, learning how to balance it and learning how to relax when you've got stuff that you want to get done, like not have your head on work when you're out exploring, and have your head on going out and exploring when you're trying to be at home doing work. But it's an interesting element, and it's an interesting experience so far, seeing how that experiencing that feeling of nostalgia to like the old trips where you're just free. And I think that's one of the amazing things about travel, and one of the big benefits of a long-term trip is not necessarily even going anywhere in particular, but just separating yourself from home and from all of the things that pull at you normally, and just quitting your job and being out for a few months and just having time to think and reorient yourself. And when you're focused on other things, you kind of lose out on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I've experienced the same thing. And there's a certain memory that just like keeps coming back to me as we've been on this trip. And I'm not really sure why, but it's when we were in Cartagena and we were staying at a hostel in the old city in Cartagena. It had a really beautiful, picturesque picturesque outdoor courtyard. And I remember, waking up, and we were kind of still in like trained work mode, I guess. We'd been working corporate jobs for a couple of years, and we were used to getting up at like 6:37 in the morning, going to bed super early. And we would still get up pretty early, like maybe around 7:38. And I remember there was a couple mornings while we were at that hostel where I'd get up and I'd make my coffee and I'd sit there and I'd, casually answer emails home, or I'd write blog posts about Colombia. And it was such a relaxing, I don't know, sort of like dreamy lifestyle, like something you read about in like Eat, Pray, Love, where you're like, yes, this is how I want to live. And it was that moment for me because I'd been so stressed out and so overwhelmed with work and my social life back home that it was so nice to be in that situation. And there's been times on this trip where it feels like there's a lot of pressure to get stuff done, yet there's also stuff that I want to see and experience. And it's been harder to strike that balance between getting that relaxation, yet still getting stuff done. And that memory came to me, and I was just remembering how blissful travel can be. And I think that we're slowly getting the hang of the whole like balancing work and being on the road. One of the benefits of having stuff to do while you're on the road is that you do get that fulfillment, because we've talked about on past episode and with guests how when you travel long term, it's nice to have a purpose, because you kind of decompress from life and then that kind of becomes stale and you kind of start to seek a purpose. And I feel like it's nice going into travel already having that purpose, but you kind of have to still find that balance between finding the freedom of travel and the relaxation bit of travel, and then also getting stuff done.
Yeah. And so in Kuala Lumpur, it was a 10-day kind of settle before a bit more travel. Here in Thailand, we're doing a 30-day settle and then a bit more travel. And then later on, hopefully we're going to try even longer in one spot and see where exactly that balance is between going out and checking out a few places and just settling in and seeing what makes us the most happy.
Yeah, definitely.
And so from Kuala Lumpur, we went up to the Cameron Highlands. We kind of decided we were going to go one other place in Malaysia. We'd heard lots of good things about Malacca, about Penang,
Langkawi.
But we'd settled on the Cameron Highlands just because a few people had told us, really beautiful area. It's up in the mountains. It's kind of an interesting experience to go from this tropical climate to a bit cooler. So we took a bus up there. It's not that far distance-wise from Kuala Lumpur, but it actually takes a while because the road is so windy and crazy.
Yeah, and also traffic's really bad in the Cameron Highlands. It's like worse than KL, and it's way, way, way smaller. I sort of had this image of the Cameron Highlands before we went that was so different from how it actually was. So we took this bus and it winds and winds and traffic's terrible. And then we arrive in the town of Tanarata and the bus drops us off at their bus station, which is basically just like a concrete cube, basically, where buses drop off. And I look up where our hotel is. We stayed at the Cameronian Inn, and it's 500 meters. It takes 5 minutes to walk. There's one main street in Tanarata with a couple of streets branching off with a couple more restaurants and most of the hotels. So the town is super, super small, and everything was really run down. I had heard that it was this place where the tourists go to cool off when it's really hot in KL and other areas, and it, attracts a lot of people. And I sort of expected it to be a little bit more luxury than it was. It was definitely not luxury in like any way. It's quite run down, a little bit older than I thought. And it was an interesting experience. What did you sort of think? Did you have expectations for the Cameron Highlands before we went?
I think in my mind, I'd pictured I'd mostly just thought people were like, oh, it's tea plantations, so green hills of tea and stuff like that. So that was kind of just the only thing that I held in my mind. And I didn't really expect it to be as touristy as it was. And we were there for Diwali, so it was really, really busy. Like you said, the town of Tanarata and really all the towns in that little stretch in the valley there are just really chaotic. It's kind of just there's lots of people, lots of buildings. It's all very disorganized. And it's a kind of a pain to get around from place to place. So when we were going, we had planned to be there for 2 days, 3 nights. And we had talked to a girl who actually worked at the escape room that we went to, who was from there. And she was like, I don't know if you actually want to go for that long. There's not that much to do. And we're like, 2 days? Like, that's not very much time at all.
That's like no time.
So
No, we had planned to spend 4 nights and 3 days. And she was like, that's way too much time there. And so we ended up only booking 3 nights and 2 days. And then we're like, oh, we'll get a feel for it.
Yeah, so we spent both days. We tried to do a small hike. We walked one day from Tanarata to another city, and then
another town.
And then the next day we went to a longer hike, which was, what was the mountain?
I think it was called Brinh Chang, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mount Brinh Chang.
Yeah, Gurung Brinh Chang. I think Gurung means mountain in Malay. And it's like one of the highest peaks in Malaysia on sort of like the mainland. The highest peak is actually on the island that's shared with Brunei and Indonesia. And everything was just so different than I expected. Like the first day we were like, okay, let's walk to Brinh Chang. It's only 5 kilometers. So we walked to this town. The town is like more rundown than.
I think it was less than 5K, wasn't it?
I thought it was like 5K. It didn't take very long though. It was like maybe an hour, 45 minutes. It was like a pretty pleasant walk through the forest. We get there and the town is even more rundown than Tanarata. And we're like, okay, we're going to go to the strawberry farm. And it's kind of basically like a greenhouse type strawberry place. And people are going like nutty over everything strawberry. So we kind of got into it a little bit and had a strawberry lassi and strawberry and whipped cream, which reminded me of going to Wimbledon in London a little bit. In like a less luxury way, more affordable way. And the second day we went to do this hike, the Gurung Brinh Chang, and the hike was way more intense than I thought. It was like muddy and we were climbing over roots and we were filthy by the time we got to the top.
It rained really heavily the day before, so really wet, quite intense hike. If it had been raining while we were doing it, we would have probably had issues.
Oh yeah, like it was nutty.
But then so you like slog your way up this mountain. It's kind of like a tropical mountain, so you're in the jungle, but you're expecting like we're going to get to the top. There's going to be amazing views, cool viewing platform. And you get to the top, there right by the top there's a couple spots where you would look out and see like beautiful view, but it's so cloudy that you can't see anything.
It was actually really creepy when we got to the top because it was like, oh, it's all cloud and there's like a direct cliff down.
Yeah, you could just like jump into the cloud.
Ooh, I just got shivers.
But then when you get to the actual top, it's occupied by some sort of military thing. So it's completely fenced off and you kind of have to just like squeeze yourself by the fence, get around to the other side, and you're just like, okay, I guess that's it.
Yeah, and then we started like hiking down the road that you can drive up and stopped at the mossy forest, which is another place to stop. We got to the tea plantation, which is kind of like the highlight of the Cameron Highlands, and we happened to go on a Monday, which is the only day that the tea plantations are closed. So my biggest piece of advice for anyone who's going to the Cameron Highlands is make sure you look up the hours of the tea plantations. It might sound obvious, but we just thought, this is like the highlight. Like they're probably open every day, like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. No, they are closed on Mondays. So we made our way to the tea plantation and it's closed, but we still get fabulous views. So, we were pretty okay with the results of that. But we're like, okay, let's call a cab. We've been hiking for like 9K. There's like 9K to get home. And we're pretty tired already because we've hiked up this like muddy mountain and then back down to the tea plantation. Cabs are like, oh, there's traffic, so we won't come get you. I'm like, is your job not to drive a taxi? Like but traffic or no traffic?
That's a recurring thing that we had experienced there.
Yeah, that's the same thing that we'd experienced the day before. We'd planned to hike to Brinh Chang and take a cab back. The cabs are like, no, there's traffic. We won't drive you. And so we ended up hiking a little bit further to this kind of other little town where there was a massive hotel and a couple restaurants. We asked the lady at this mall type area if she can call us a cab. And she's like, no, sorry, none of them will come get you. And we're like, we're still like 8K from Tanarata. So we ended up hitchhiking, and a lot of people were surprised to find out when we posted on social media that was our first hitchhiking experience. And neither of us have ever been opposed to hitchhiking. We've just never really had a reason to hitchhike. We've never gone out of our way to do it. We've always just like taken buses or taxis or whatever. But we really didn't have much of an option at that point. It was either continue hiking, we were both tired and hungry at that point, or stick our thumb out and hope that somebody picked us up. And a nice older Malaysian man stopped, and with his pickup truck, he had all this room in the front bed of the truck. So I tried to get
front of the cab.
So I tried to get into the truck, and he kind of like, no, you're not getting in there. Thumbs me towards the back. So we hopped in the back with his pickup truck and cruised on back. And it was a great experience.
Yeah, it was fun. It was like one of those things where it's like on your bucket list kind of hitchhike somewhere.
Yeah. I think that hitchhiking gets kind of a bad rap by some people.
Who gives hitchhiking a bad rap?
I think that there's some people who do.
I
mean, I was always told when I was younger, like, don't hitchhike, it's dangerous. Like, I have a cousin who's like a little bit more wild and free. My parents were always like, never be like her. She hitchhiked across Canada. That's terrible.
Yeah. I feel like, if anything, I'd say it's the other way, where hitchhiking is like seen as something that's like overly cool.
I guess it depends who you're talking to.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're talking to your parents or if you're talking to
other
young
20-somethings, yeah. Yeah, definitely. But if you are in the Cameron Highlands, don't be afraid to hitchhike. The locals are pretty used to it because the cabs don't drive. It's definitely worth a try if you haven't done it before, and if you're an experienced hitchhiker, you know, just stick your thumb out there. It's pretty safe, and there's tons of people who are willing to pick you up. We talked to some other foreigners who are also doing the same hike as us. We kind of ran into them multiple times during the day, and they ended up doing the same thing as us, hitchhiking to get back.
Did they? I thought they couldn't get...
No, they did. I talked to one of the girls later, and she said that they hitchhiked from the point that we saw them.
Okay. So from the Cameron Highlands, we went to Ipoh just for one night. Ipoh is, if you were to put Ipoh, KL, and Cameron Highlands on a map, they kind of look like a triangle, but they're kind of separated by mountain ranges. So Ipoh to KL is looks a little bit longer, but it's more of a straight shot, less mountain on a highway. So we went Cameron, Ipoh, KL. Ipoh, as a city, it's kind of not known for much other than Chinese culture, Chinese food.
White coffee.
That's the thing, yeah.
Yeah. And so Ipoh is a place that your bus would stop if you were going KL to Penang. So some people will get off the bus there and stay in Ipoh for a night. I think that Ipoh is relatively interesting. There's like a new town and an old town, and the old town has some older Chinese areas where they brew white coffee. You can get it super affordably. White coffee is not white, for the record.
So white coffee is just a different way of roasting the coffee and a different way of serving the coffee. So they roast it with, I think it's coconut oil, and then they serve it with condensed milk, and that's why they call it white coffee. It's not actually a different type of coffee.
Yeah, no, that's right. And then the other thing that I was completely unclear on this whole white coffee thing. We got there and I was like, why is my coffee still coffee colored? I thought this was supposed to be white. I expected it to fully be white, and I don't know if that sounds dumb or not, but it's called white coffee. I thought it was like a different type of bean. No, it's just roasted differently and put with a little bit of condensed milk.
Yeah, so Ipoh wasn't our favorite spot. The one cool thing in the old town, I don't know if the city's commissioned it or it's just going to happen naturally, but there are interesting pieces of street art all over the place. So you can go walk around and check them all out, which we did one afternoon, which is a really cool experience. Kind of like, gonna go catch them all. And there's some really cool, interesting art. Like there's one of a paper plane with two kids riding it on the side of one building. There's another big mural on the one side of one building kind of showing historical Ipoh. So that's definitely something I'd recommend doing. And then we went to a restaurant there called Plan B and ate it there a couple times. And they're actually in KL as well. So if you're in KL or around Malaysia, definitely go check out Plan B. They've got awesome food.
Yeah. Like sort of more westernized a little bit, but still some like Malaysian fusion food. A little bit more expensive, but definitely like worth treating yourself, especially if you've been eating street food for a while or you're just craving like a really good meal.
Yeah. And so Penang is probably more popular and is apparently well known for its food. Ipoh, if we were going back, I definitely wouldn't go to Ipoh again.
Yeah, I would probably echo that. I think it was a cool experience. I didn't hate Ipoh. I think that part of it was that the Cameron Highlands were so different from what we expected. And in hindsight, I think we could have just come back to KL or we would have continued on to Penang. Ipoh, if you've got the time and you really like street art, is worth a night stay. You don't really need to stay longer than that, though. It's pretty close to KL, so you could probably even go out for a day if you really like street art and you want to check out some of the good food there. But nothing super spectacular about the town. I think that if we were going back again, I would go up to the Cameron Highlands for a couple days and maybe continue on to Penang, maybe go to Langkawi for a couple days, and then maybe fly out from there.
Yeah, and for the Cameron Highlands, I'd definitely say it's a cool experience because it is a different climate. It's a nice opportunity if you've been maybe like southern Thailand or Malaysia for a while to like get up somewhere where it's like in the low 20s and it feels like almost like you'll wake up in the morning and breathe in fresh air. So it's cool for that experience. Great hiking if you kind of go off the beaten path. But I would try to go like midweek and try to avoid a holiday.
Yes, do not go on Diwali.
Because there's just this one road up through the valley between the towns. And if it's busy and there's bad traffic, no one will take you anywhere. Or you'll have to sit in a car. So then your options for hiking are limited because you need to drive somewhere else to get a hike. And then also when you're considering it, maybe if you see like a guest house that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, I would definitely consider that because there's not much going on in these towns and you do kind of end up getting like stuck there a little bit because transportation's an issue.
Yeah, when we were hiking back, we saw some spectacular guest houses that had like amazing views of the landscape. And I think the landscape is really what you would go to the Cameron Highlands for. Tanarata, Bringchang are not spectacular towns in any way. They're not even like nice towns. They're basically just streets that serve the purpose of having hotels, guest houses, and restaurants to eat at. So it really is about the landscape. And I think something that was really nice for us, the reason why I wanted to go up to the Cameron Highlands is we'd just been in cities for so long and I'd really miss nature. And I think that going there did kind of allow me to slow down a little bit and get outside and move my body a little bit more, which is what I was really craving.
So for Malaysia, we talked to quite a few people who had been doing more traveling there. What are the other spots that should be on people's radars if they're going to Malaysia?
So Malacca is not too far and it's just a little bit south. It's an old colonial town. Apparently the architecture there is really beautiful and that's worth a visit. Like we said before, Penang apparently is a really good food hub. It's just a couple hours northwest on the coast. Langkawi is an island. You can do diving there. You can snorkel. It gives you more of like the beach experience. That's somewhere that I think that if we were going back, I would really like to go, depending on what season you go in. So I didn't even look at the east coast of Malaysia when we were going there because we were there in October, which is rainy season, and the east basically closes because there's too much water, too much rain. And during different times of the year, the west will close. So Langkawi, Penang, Malacca, not as accessible. So do your research based on the time that you're going in. There's lots of great resources on the internet. But there are places on the east coast that are also really popular and super spectacular if you're looking for more of the beach diving scene. If you want to make your way over to the islands, it's kind of interesting how Brunei and Indonesia and Malaysia kind of share an island. That's where the highest peak in Malaysia is. There's also a really popular dive spot over there. So if you want to make the trip over to the island.
Isn't the diving in Indonesia?
No, it's in Malaysia. Yeah, so I think that would be a really neat experience. I mean, we have talked about maybe making our way over to that island at some point. So maybe we'll cross paths with Malaysia again. Just depending on like your budget and your time. I'm not sure that just depending on your time or your budget, you would have to take a plane over to that area because it is a separate island, but that could be a whole nother trip in of itself to do the mountain peak, to hike for a couple days, to do some scuba diving over there, and then maybe to do Borneo and Brunei at the same time. Who knows? Just depending on what you're looking to do. So I think that covers pretty much what we did in Malaysia, our experiences there. overall, I think we both really enjoyed Malaysia. I definitely would like to go back to Malaysia at some point and explore the places that we didn't get to go. Would you sort of echo that as well?
Yeah, I'd like to go back and travel there a bit more.
Awesome. So we will post links to the places we went in the show notes. We'll have photos. We also have a blog post up on what we did in KL as well as Cameron Highlands. So if you're in those areas or you're looking to check them out, you can read about what we did a little bit more in detail on the blog posts at www.theworldwanderers.com.
Until next time.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.